So, caring for a loved one can be one of the most overwhelming and yet joyful things that we can do. And today we're going to dive into the challenges and the very real burdens of caregiving, as well as the joys of caregiving. So, I welcome today Isabel to our podcast, The Legacy Years. Thank you so much, Isabel, for being here and for sharing your wisdom with my audience today.
Thank you, Kristy. This is such a pleasure.
Well, let's tell folks a little bit about you. Tell them, how did you get into this field?
It was personal experience. I became a family caregiver at the age of 20 or 21. I don't remember.
Oh, wow.
My dad passed away suddenly. My mom was recovering from cancer and she was grieving. So, not a good combination.
Yeah.
And during that time, there were many things that I noticed that were not optimal. So, probably because my dad passed away young-ish, there was really not an exit plan for him. There was not an exit plan for his business. There was not an exit plan for a bunch of legal stuff.
Yeah.
And that was a lot to deal with. So that part of planning was missing. And I don't think we realize that we can be missing any day. Life can happen. So we don't plan for stuff. And that was one of the things that I learned, that we needed to prevent for the worst and then just enjoy the rest of the journey. Another thing that happened was that I went from being the youngest, pampered, the one that I was always taking care after everybody. Like I was born after 11 years. So all of my siblings, my parents, they would just pamper me nonstop. And after my dad's passing, I had to figure out how to care for my mom. I had to figure out how I was going to finish paying for college. I had to figure out a lot of things, and that included having very difficult conversations that I was not prepared to have.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
probably nobody is. I don't know.
Right. But even at such a young age.
And especially the family that I came from, where problems didn't exist. They were just shoved underneath the carpet and that's it. We we never talked about problems. We never talked about what was going on. And there were many things that specifically my parents would say, like, you don't say these outside of this house. You don't mention these problems outside of the home. So that has stayed with me. I'm not going to go with anybody and say, like, these are my problems in life. I try to stay positive. But when there are problems, I don't know how to address those problems. I
Yeah.
don't know how to ask for help. I don't know how to ask people to do something for me. And I found with time that all of caregivers fall into that category. They don't know how to ask for help. They don't know how to include others in the conversation. Generally, we are just so afraid of having a difficult conversation
Yeah.
because there are so many emotions involved in them that we just don't know how to do
Yeah.
them. And finally, the third thing that I learned during this process was I didn't learn. I just lost myself in the process. I was turning off fires every day, surviving, and I lost myself. I stopped partying. I stopped going out with my friends. I don't have any college friends.
Your life was very different, right, during your college years.
Yeah, I was living something completely different than anybody else. And I didn't know at the time how to build boundaries and prioritize myself. So when I moved to Fort Worth and I started noticing stuff with my mom, she would ask help to set her Netflix and was like, I don't live close to you anymore.
Mm.
I can't help you with that right now. And one day she fell, broke her nose. And
Oh,
that was for me the point in which I knew that I needed to do something, that I needed to get everything planned. So if and when she needed support, she would have it. And that's how I created Tum Coeur, because I think we all deserve some kind of love and some kind of support, especially for caregivers.
yeah, yeah. So, what do you think that families misunderstand the most about caregiving?
I think there are two things that they misunderstand. First is that just because that you're the main caregiver, you know how to do the things best. And that is not necessarily true. Others might have good ideas, other might have better ideas than you, which I also hear the other part. Well, my sibling, my brother, my sister hasn't been going to the doctor with us. So they don't know what the doctors say. But
Yeah,
just because they're not there, it doesn't mean that the ideas that they bring to the table are wrong. And that brings a lot of isolation, because if I'm saying, well, you're wrong, then, well, I don't have to worry about this because you have it all covered
yeah,
up. That is one thing. And another thing is that I don't know if it's because we're women and how we were raised or something else, but the caregiving gene tells you to put everybody before you.
yeah.
And you forget about yourself. You forget what is your favorite flower, what is your favorite breakfast, what is your favorite whatever, because you start giving the favorite whatever to the person that you love.
Mm,
And you don't give anything to you.
yeah, I see that. I see that a lot. And people think, oh, that'll never happen to me. I'm good at prioritizing or, categorizing, just putting this thing in a box and then going and doing this thing. But it does happen.
Yes, it does
Yeah.
happen.
So, you mentioned the incident with your mom, breaking her nose and falling. What are some signs that families might look for to recognize that a family member is in the position where they need more support?
Falling is a big one. Another very common, especially with aging parents, is things are off. They haven't taken a shower in 3 days. And I'm just saying this as an example, because
Yeah.
if your mom never takes a shower and she keeps not taking a shower, then that's normal. But if there are things that are off, that they used to be normal and now they are not, those are things you want to pay attention to. There is rotten food in the fridge when my mom was like the clean freak. That is something that's off.
Yeah. Yeah.
So probably those are the two biggest ones. Either something's off or they're losing strength, they are
Yeah.
losing mobility, and they might fall.
Yeah. Yeah. So caregiving is obviously a big responsibility and can be very overwhelming. So, what are the resources or services that you recommend to families so that they can avoid burnout?
One is to have a plan for that. And I think the first thing for anybody is to recognize that you are going to burn out. Recognize that it can happen. I'm not saying it will, but be aware of that and have a plan to avoid burnout. Because once you're burnout, if you go to the spa, that's not going to solve the burnout.
Mm,
If you're already burnout, getting 1 day off of vacation, or even a week, it's not going to help. So you need a strategy to get through it. So if you know you're a caregiver, and probably we should start with that, you should recognize that you're a caregiver. If you're doing something for a loved one, recognize that you're a caregiver. If you're picking groceries, if you're going to doctor's appointments, if you're supporting your parents in any way, consider yourself a caregiver.
I really appreciate you saying that because I think people don't recognize that. They're like, "Oh, I'm just doing this one thing or I'm just doing these 2 things." But it is still something they're fitting into their already normal busy lives.
Yes. And if you don't recognize that that is caregiving, how can you recognize any of the rest?
Yeah.
And there are studies that certain cultures don't perceive it as much. So, for example, Black people won't recognize that they're family caregivers. It's just something they do for their families. And it's something that is expected. Same with
Mm,
Indians and a lot of Latino cultures. It's just expected of them to do the work instead of recognizing that that's another hat that you're wearing.
yeah.
So, first of all, you need to recognize that if you're listening to this and you're doing anything for a loved one, picking groceries, doing any kind of favors that is consistent over time, then you're a caregiver. And then it's creating a plan. And for everybody, that plan looks different. Some people get their energy and that the bad energy out by meditating. Other people need high energy exercise. Other people need probably gardening or doing art. So for each one of us is something different. And having that plan and knowing yourself and what you can do for yourself, it's probably the easiest.
Well, and I like that approach to it because I think so many people think, "Oh, I'm gonna take this day respite or I'm gonna take this vacation respite." But really, that's not a long-term solution. It's a short-term fix. And so what you're saying is they need to learn to figure out what fills them and balance that within the caregiving that they're given that they are performing.
Yes. And for each one of us, it's something different. And you have to know which area in your life is the one that is suffering.
Yeah.
Because maybe that self care means that you're going back to work. And that is something that most of the people don't realize. If you're at home 24/7 caring for someone and your financial resources are draining, maybe that looks like you're going back to work.
And so when someone looks at that, um, and they're like, "Well, I can't go back to work. I have to be here, or I can't go to the gym, or I can't garden. I have to be here." What's the solution for that? How do they make it work?
I think that's where a lot of the problem relies that we focus on the problem, not how the solution looks like.
Yeah.
And even for difficult conversations, we focus on what is wrong, but not how we can solve it or how that looks when it's solved.
Yeah.
And I really like working with this kind of perspective because it's very different than having your burnout, then you have to do A, B, C, D. So, how does it look like if you are energized or you have a balanced life in everything you do? So, how does it look like for you that it is solved? So, talking about this perspective about caregiving, how does it look like for you to not feel overwhelmed, to not
Mhm.
be burnout? And for me in particular, because I can't talk for anybody else, for me in particular is that I have slow mornings before I start working. Then I work really, really hard. I finish work as early as possible. And then I spend time with my family. I dedicate that time in the afternoon to figure out family affairs.
Got it.
And I don't know how it looks for you. Maybe you want to share.
Well, for me personally, it's having time to, do the things that I want to do for me. So like having the freedom to go. I'm a big pickleballer now, so being able to get out with my community and play pickleball several times a week, if I can do that, I feel like, "Oh, I got some time to myself," and I feel rejuvenated, and, you know, I get energized from being able to do that. So, I can see what you're saying, but, like, if I couldn't do that because, you know, my loved one couldn't be alone, then what's the solution for that? So I guess a lot of people are like, I remember I had this gentleman who came to us, and we were talking about some mortgage solutions for him, and his wife had Alzheimer's, and they didn't have any children, and they didn't have any family. And he was her sole caregiver. And that was his job 24/7. And he was precious. I mean, his heart was just like, I love that I'm able to do this for her, but it has to be hard because
Hmm.
he's it. So, for a person like that, what do they do?
Usually we rely on family first. But what would happen if he were to pass or have a heart attack? Who would be there for his wife?
Hmm.
And that's when you started thinking outside of the box. Are there good friends that would want to come over once a week and spend some time with her? Is there a community, a senior community that you can drop her off and go do something for yourself?
Hmm.
Is there a nurse that could come and take care of your wife for several hours and while you do something else? So it's thinking outside of the box.
Right.
And I think that's why I call my program a lab, because it's let's see what happens if we mix A with B, and what solution is going to have, what's going to happen. And maybe none of those options are good. Maybe we need to go and start thinking about other options. Maybe we can think, maybe we can try, but hey, maybe she can stay alone for a little bit. And each solution has different results. We just need to try them. And if they
Yeah.
work, they work. And if they didn't, then we try something else.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. So it's different for everybody.
Yeah. And I don't
Yeah.
know. And I said maybe she can stay by herself. Maybe that is not an option. Maybe she will burn the house down with her inside if that happens. So maybe that is a solution that is a no from the beginning. But if you start brainstorming things,
Yeah.
and if you brainstorm 20 things, 50 things that could work, one of them will work.
Yeah. Something's going to hit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. You've talked a lot about planning, and I think that that's one of the things that if I could shout it from the rooftop with every aspect of aging that people fail in and don't consider anything until the crisis hits, it's planning. So what role does planning, financial, medical, legal, what does that play in easing that caregiving journey?
For me, it is understanding how that journey looks like. And the thing with caregiving is that we don't know and we don't want to know. So part of it is knowing how you want the journey to look like. And because it's caregiving and we're talking about people being sick, we don't want to think about it. It's easier
Mhm.
to plan retirement when you're talking about traveling and doing your favorite hobbies and spending time with grandchildren. That is pretty easy. But when it's planning for when you're sick, well, I don't know how it's going to look like. And I don't know. I don't want to think about it because we need to think about the worst case scenario. So, first of all, we need to understand what we expect from that journey. And it's understanding where we want to live, how we want to live, the activities that we want to do,
Mhm.
who is part, and one of that is very important, who is part of that journey. Because it's not just one caregiver. We live in a
Right.
community. And even if we don't recognize it, there are doctors and nurses and all these services around caregiving that you're receiving. So those people are part of the journey.
Yeah.
Once you have that sort of figure out, then you start working with other things. Does your finances fit this caregiving journey? Maybe they don't. Maybe you need to go back to the board and figure out what you can move or change. Maybe they do. Maybe you have extra. That is perfect. But that is the first step, like envisioning exactly what you want, making sure that the finances agree with the whole situation. And then it's the legal layer, making sure
Yeah.
that whatever you want, it is written down and there's a way to protect your wishes.
Yeah.
And then you go into the healthcare and the little things. I always like putting things that you like doing because we don't think about that. And I remember when I was very young, we would go um to a senior community with very old people. I don't know if it was memory care or maybe I was just 5 and everybody was 70 and I looked them very,
Yeah.
very old. And I would think, I don't know what I'm going to do because all the things that I like doing are movement. I like sports. I like things that are movement. I don't like any of the crafty things I don't like. And I would think, what am I going to do when I become an older person like all of these people that are just sitting down and knitting and crocheting or whatever. And it is so important to know what we're going to be doing. Maybe you like board games or even you still like moving and you're going to join a basketball team on a wheelchair. Who knows?
Right.
But that is an option. And you have to be open to options and where you want to live are those options available for you.
Yeah.
Because that part of joy and finding joy in whatever you're doing will keep you alive, will keep you experiencing joy after you're sick. So I think that is crucial. At least for
Yeah.
me, it is.
Yeah. And I think if you don't leave those types of instructions, you don't have those conversations early, you don't get to have a say anymore because
Mhm.
you may not be in a position to have a say. So having those conversations, albeit they're tough, they are important ones to have and will, I think, help at least your family will know I'm doing what they wanted me to do. And I think that helps you as the family member and the caregiver know, hey, I'm doing my best because I know this is what they wanted.
Yeah. And if you're communicating, I want to keep doing these kinds of things, then it's easier for everybody because they can look for those things.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You know, when you think about caregiving, there's a lot of stress involved in caregiving. There's a lot of guilt involved. What do you say to people who are caregivers who are struggling with those emotions? Or maybe even on the flip side, if you're the family member who's getting the care, there can be some guilt involved there too, because you're, relying now on someone you love and you're adding burden to them. What do you say to those people?
That is a tough one because you have to pay attention to where those thoughts are coming from. And there's usually a trigger. And I was talking last week with a friend about a Catholic guilt. We were both raised Catholic, and I was telling her that eventually I got rid of the Catholic guilt, but
It was hard.
she has, yeah, she hasn't. So, but it is hard. And you need to recognize what is triggering that guilt. So if you're feeling guilty about something, you need to change how you think about that particular case. So every time that someone does something for me, I feel guilty that I can't do it. that I can do that thing anymore. I'm just going to take this example.
Yeah.
So when someone does something for me, I feel guilt. And you have to think, what are your thoughts behind it? What are you telling yourself? So are you telling yourself that you're not good enough or that you're a burden? What are you telling yourself? And once you recognize what you're telling yourself, you can start working on that thought and you can change that thought.
Yeah.
But it is easier said than done.
Yeah. I think that's true. Yeah. But I do think the advice of looking for what is the root cause, like why am I feeling this way, and talking through and working through those things is great advice.
Well, you're not going to be able to change your feelings unless you work on them.
Yeah. What about, and you talked a little bit about this, so, maybe we've covered it, but what would you say to families when there's disagreements about care? How can they work through, sister thinks this and brother thinks that when it pertains to care of a loved one?
So, the same as that I mentioned before, how does it look like when the problem is solved? How does it look like for you and what does it look like for me? And you have to bridge that conversation. So the first part is really understanding where the other one is coming from. And I think this step is, for the most part, is forgotten.
Mm,
So we just jump to conclusions and how things should be happening, how they should look like. But we don't stop to talk and connect with the other and ask questions. So if you're saying that we should do A, why? Why are you saying that?
mhm.
I read this article that said that this would benefit our mom because of blah. Oh, good. Can you share that article with me?
Yeah.
Maybe you change your perspectives. Maybe you don't. And then you come back and you say, like, hey, I I also read these other thing that contradicts what you said. What do you think about it? And you start opening the conversation,
Yeah.
understanding what the other, but you need to understand where they're coming from and why they're saying. So when you start connecting and when you start having that conversation where you're coming from, then you can find either a third solution that works for everybody. But I think most of the times someone comes and say, and I see this all the time, a family reunion, main caregiver knows it all, and someone says, you should be doing this differently. And I go defensive, like, how? I'm here all the time. I know what is best. And then there we fight.
Yeah.
Instead of like, okay, I'm going to entertain your thought. Tell me more about it.
That's a good way to approach it. I think it is so hard because if you are that main caregiver, you may feel like someone's attacking you, like, "Oh, I'm not doing it right," or, "I'm not doing it the way that they would," or, "Well, they're not here." So I love that approach. I think it's very collaborative, and that's important.
And again, it requires a lot of self introspection because if you don't catch yourself in that moment, then you're not going to open yourself to what other people are saying.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time today. And I always ask one last question. If there is one thing that you could say to people out there about caregiving, one last piece of wisdom that you would leave them with, what would that be?
I think we have been instilled that caregiving needs to be hard. And we don't perceive that when we're raising children. We don't say, oh, being a
Mm,
mother is so hard. Oh, you're going through such a tough time. So if we don't say that about children, why say that about aging people?
yeah.
So if we can change that perspective, I think we can change into, hey, this is what is happening. We can enjoy the ride.
Yeah. I love that. Tell folks a little bit about your company and what you do. I certainly want them to know if they need your services, what it is that you do.
So I help families figure out the planning, putting all the pieces to the puzzle together. And I know there's a lot of people who help and support with that. I just guide them through the whole process and make sure that they pay attention to the little details that are not so little.
Yeah.
So the hobbies, the fun part, I help with that. And probably many other people don't. Definitely lawyers and financial advisors don't pay attention to that. So I help putting those pieces of the puzzle together. I help with difficult conversations that we talked about, and I help with a self care plan. So I help with those three main pieces. I don't know when this is coming out, but okay. So if you're listening this as it is aired, October 15, I'm launching a program. And in that program, you go through all the things that I've talked about. And the plus of this program is that it is a cohort, so you get to connect with other people in the journey.
Very
So
nice.
if they want to join, it is the perfect time.
Okay. Perfect. Great. And how would they find out about signing up for that?
They can go to my website. I'm pretty sure you can share that on the show notes, so I'll
Yeah.
share
I'll put
that.
it in the comments.
So my website, you go, you sign up, and we're ready to go.
Okay. Sounds great. Well, again, thank you so much for your time on here today, and I appreciate your wisdom.
Thank you, Kristy. This was awesome, and I really enjoyed the conversation.